Hello, I'm Villain Fury, and we have another deep dive for you guys. And I said I wasn't doing these anymore, but then Fantasy Flight Games went and previewed Wonder Man. He's wondrous, he's wonderful, and he really got me wondering. His kit is, very interesting, and I just took a bunch of notes on my own and figured, why don't I just share all the stuff I've kind of, thought about, figured out, kind of theory crafted with you guys. So without further ado, we'll just fly into it. This won't have all the fancy graphics of my old deep dives. We're just kind of here on Hall of Heroes looking at this, and then I'll show you my notes that I've cleaned up, like in a Word document. But it's this or nothing. I still think it's going to be very interesting, very detailed, because Wonder Man in many ways really is wondrous. There's a lot of unusual, different stuff going on with him, and we're going to start by looking at his alter ego. He's got 3 recovery, he's got 6 hand size, civilian alter ego trait, and that's the most boring things we're going to talk about this entire video. He has this Ionic Energy Being ability where you may include events with a printed energy resource icon from any aspect in your deck. This is huge. This means that whatever aspect you're in, you're going to have access to different kind of interesting damage options, forwarding options, even like defense options. It's super flexible, and there's already a good purpose for this because his other ability, the setup ability, says put Ionic Physiology into play. This is going to interact with all those energy resource icons, and wow, is there a lot to talk about with that. But just bear in mind, whatever aspect you're playing him in, he's going to have a huge range of events to draw from, and there's some pretty interesting multi-aspect combos. Some are better than others, and I think he's going to generally sort of be inclined for the cheaper side of those events, but there are definitely different options with him, which is really cool. I think the downside here is that, whatever aspect you play him in, maybe you just take the best energy resource events for him, in kind of every deck, any aspect, but I think that kind of thing is a problem for Maria Hill, whose alter ego ability is kind of similar in that she can take shield support from any aspect. So if she's in protection, she has all the best ones from every aspect. She's in leadership, same thing. So her decks can feel a little bit samey, but there is a very limited amount of shield supports. There are an absolute ton of events with a printed energy resource in the bottom left corner. So there's a lot more variety here, and a lot more different ways they can interact with other things in different aspects. So I think you would naturally just have more variety. What being able to take all those energy events also means is that, since you kind of like a bunch of forwarding in aggression or, a bunch of defense in justice, he's going to be a very solo-friendly hero, but, that's not going to hold him back in multiplayer one bit. It just means solo is going to have all its bases covered pretty easily. Let's go ahead and just skip to Ionic Physiology before we look at the hero side. So this is the permanent card that comes in as part of the setup. You can tuck 3 cards here. What do you tuck? Well, the response says after you play an event with a printed energy resource, tuck that event from your discard pile under this card. Heal 1 damage from your identity. So you're playing Wonder Man, and you have to take some damage to be able to be healed by this, to be able to use this in the first place, in fact. So turn 1, this card is kind of offline, unless you can somehow sustain damage. Maybe if you play Taunt in protection. There's also Bait and Switch, which has an energy resource at the bottom left corner, which is, kind of a Taunt-like card you can take in any aspect. It's not necessarily the best card, but it's going to get you 1 extra healing here because of Ionic Physiology. You play it, you tuck it, you get that healing, and it's also going to power up your hero card, as we'll see in a minute. So actually kind of interesting. There's a whole bunch of interesting stuff like that just has fun interactions with him. If you can find, Clarity of Purpose or the Rogue ally, Blood Rage and Aggression, there are various ways to deal damage to yourself. But I think turn 1, maybe you're just going to focus on setting up and not spamming energy events, because he's going to like to try and fill this up to have 3 cards tucked here, and then he's going to be able to discard them all. We'll see that on his hero card in a second, and start it again. So you want to kind of build it up to 3, clear it out, and then, keep going. So in an ideal world, you might be able to play 3 energy resource events per round, per turn, and then clear them, and then start the whole thing again next turn. That will get you 3 healing from Ionic Physiology if you can pull that off. But then if we look at his hero card, Wonder Man, his first ability here says Wonder Man gets +1 attack for each card tucked under Ionic Physiology. So effectively, by tucking 3 cards under that card, you will have 3 healing, 1 at a time per event, and then you'll have a massive attack stat. So it's almost like you're gaining 1 damage per energy event you played. The only problem is he starts with a puny 1 attack. So, the first one that you tuck under Ionic Physiology just to get, that +1 to 2 total attack, I don't think that's that meaningful. If you've got 2 attack, well, you might as well just, exhaust the fort for 2 still, something like that. It's not a ton of extra value, but as soon as you hit 3 attack, it's nice. And if you have 3 cards tucked under Ionic Physiology, you get up to 4 attack. That's really, really good. And once you've made that big basic attack, the force response here will trigger, and Wonder Man has to discard each card tucked under Ionic Physiology. So play 3 energy events, punch for 4, and then you discard them all from beneath the Ionic Physiology where you tuck those events, and the cycle starts again. There's quite a lot of value to be gained from this, but you have to have sustained at least 3 damage. So again, turn 1, a little bit tricky. But he also has some stuns, maybe you go Ultra Ego, etc. There are going to be situations maybe where you aren't fully damaged. If you play standard mode, some of the easier villains or certain villains that have mechanics that challenge you elsewhere outside of being damaged, some of those guys hit for like 1 or 2 damage in some attacks, and you might not sustain enough just from like tanking the villain's attack to the face to fully utilize Ionic Physiology and tuck a full 3 card under that turn. But you also might not draw enough events to do that. So there's going to be turns where you only tuck 1 or 2 cards, and some turns where you tuck 3 cards and get full value, do a big 4 attack, and get ready to start the process again. I think it's going to have kind of its own flow you might have to get used to, and depending on how many energy events, depending on their cost in the deck, each deck might play it a little bit differently, which I think will be kind of a fun thing to learn. Imagine if you play the same deck 3 times with him, you'll get a little bit better at optimizing his power recycling, getting those cards tucked under Ionic Physiology for maximum healing and damage compared to the previous plays. So I think that's really cool. But to fully talk about Wonder Man himself, 2-4, which is nice, although I do think he'll basic attack more often to keep clearing Ionic Physiology, to keep healing, and then 2 defense, which I don't think he'll use very much, but it's certainly nice to have as opposed to not have it. 12 hit points is pretty juicy, which is going to let you, tank a hit from the villain on turn 1, and then heal it back up on turn 2 by playing some energy events, then get hit again, so on and so forth. If he gets hit twice, he's probably going to survive. Also, really love the art here. He looks very dynamic. I think it's really cool, but he also kind of looks like a jerk. I don't know if that's intentional, but I kind of like it. I think I'm going to really enjoy playing Wonder Man and having this art in front of me. So that is kind of a general look at Wonder Man. There's quite a lot to talk about there. Just with his identity card and the permanent card it brings in, he has a whole different realm of deck building and a very unique kind of flow of play, a kind of whole game plan that's going to sort of vary and you have to adapt. And, it's really fascinating. And this is why I think he's such an interesting, wonderful hero that I had to make this video about. So I'm super excited for him. To look at his events, he's got 3 copies of his forwarding event, Active Altruism, 2 copies of an attack event, Ionic Blast, and 3 copies of Starstruck, another attack that can also stun an enemy. So maybe you use it for minions, but maybe you'll use it for the villain. And we'll start with Starstruck because this is a really fascinating card. So it's 1 cost, nice and cheap, superpower traded, and attack, of course. You deal damage to an enemy equal to your attack stat. And for Wonder Man, that could get up to 4. So this could be a 1-cost card for 4 damage. And you don't have to do the second line, which is if you overpay for it with an energy resource, you can stun the enemy. You can do that, that's very efficient. But if you don't do that, a 1-cost event for 4 damage is perfectly good, very desirable, and nice kind of mid-range damage, which is going to take out a lot of minions. The interesting thing here is that this is an energy event, like all of the events in his signature cards, but that raises a small problem, because if Ionic Physiology has 3 cards tucked under it, Wonder Man has 4 attack, great, Starstruck is at maximum damage. The problem is, if you have 3 cards tucked under Ionic Physiology, if it is at maximum power, there are maximum 3 cards can be tucked there. You cannot tuck a 4th card. So Starstruck will do full damage, but then I can't tuck it under Ionic Physiology despite it having that energy resource. So you have a choice with Starstruck. Do you get 4 damage out of it? Or do you get 3 damage out of it, but then are able to tuck it, getting the healing from placing it under Ionic Physiology and the +1 attack on your hero card? I think most of the time you're gonna, only play it when you've got 2 cards under Ionic Physiology, when you've got 3 attack on Wonder Man. So it'll do a little bit less damage, but you'll get the healing, and then the damage will kind of be made up by now being able to, be on your hero when you make a basic attack. But there might be situations where that varies. And again, if you smack the villain with this, that overpaying for option with an energy resource becomes really appealing, so you can stun the villain. The only problem with stunning the villain is you might not take damage, and if you want to keep healing with Ionic Physiology, you kind of want to get punched in the face every turn or so. Moving to Ionic Blast here, his other attack card. This is kind of more traditional. You pay 1 cost and, it's a superpower traded one as well, but it will deal 3 damage to an enemy. That can be played like that. That is perfectly efficient, pretty good, and it's got this energy resource at the bottom left. So you can tuck it under Ionic Physiology, heal, get that +1 attack, so it's kind of nice in that regard. However, if you want to overpay for it with energy resources, and you'll start to see that as a theme with this guy, it can deal 2 additional damage per resource you overpay with, until you overpay the maximum of 3, which caps this thing's damage out at 9. 9 damage sounds impressive, but it is kind of expensive for that. But you do get to tuck it under your Ionic Physiology, heal, get an attack boost. So in some ways, playing this is kind of 10 damage for 5 effective resources. If you had 5 cards in hand, let's say bunch of energies and Ionic Blast, you would get basically 10 damage if you factored in the boosted damage from making your basic attack, plus that healing. So pretty good. I think he has some ways to easily overpay for this and pay for it, and it's going to be a very nice card to have. The fact that it can deal 3 damage, 5 damage, 7 damage, or 9 damage makes it incredibly flexible, and that is a very nice strength to have. The forwarding card, Active Altruism, is the forwarding version of Ionic Blast. This one is 0 cost to start with, and it will just remove 1 threat, which isn't a great ratio, but it's very flexible in low amount, and you'll get to tuck this under Ionic Physiology to heal and get an attack boost, so that's kind of nice. But if you overpay for it, which you can do to a maximum of 2, you can remove 2 additional threat. So super flexible again. This can be 1 threat removal, 3 threat removal, or 5 threat removal. And with 3 copies of this, if you maximally, is that a word? It is now. If you maximally overpay for this, every time it comes up, you'll have potentially 15 threat removal per deck pass, which is quite nice, notably because Wonder Man, I think, is going to want to use that basic attack to, capitalize on his boosted attack stat and clear out Ionic Physiology to start healing again. So his basic forwarding, not that desirable in my opinion, unless you haven't fully charged up, in which case maybe it is. But nonetheless, having 3 good forwarding card events, it's really nice for solo play again, and just good in multiplayer anyway, though, because Fret always goes crazy there. So it's good on all fronts. This gives him a total of 8 events, all with an energy resource. And while overpaying for them is nice, and he has a card to help with that, more on that later, you might want to keep them cheap and pay the minimum amount. This is so you can play more energy events in one turn, because Ionic Blast, I can overpay for it by 3, sure, but those 3 resources, it could be Starstruck, a card to pay for that, and Active Altruism. And so instead of overpaying for Ionic Blast, I could have played 2 additional events, and my Ionic Physiology is just charged up incredibly quickly, all that healing, and then that basic attack damage. So it's going to be interesting decisions, overpay for it, get what you need immediately, or maybe, spread out the events you're playing and charge your Ionic Physiology up faster. I think that's going to be my preference. That's kind of how it's feeling, but I think it's going to vary by situation, by deck, by scenario, by what's going on, by your teammates, and what needs doing at any given time. You should stay flexible, but obviously if you can charge up Ionic Physiology, I think that's generally going to be pretty nice value. Wonder Man also has a resource card, and it's completely insane. It has a single energy resource on the bottom left, but the hero interrupt says you can take up to 3 damage, and it generates an additional resource for each damage taken that way. That is crazy good. That means this can be a 4 resource card. Now you would have to take 3 damage for your troubles, but for my money, a damage taken is kind of like half a resource of negative value. It's kind of a varying value as well, depends on the situation. But long story short, if I'm playing this and taking 3 damage, I think this is at least 2.5 resources of net value is kind of how I'm envisioning it. But also taking damage can be just very nice anyway to make sure you can use your Ionic Physiology and get those benefits. So it works really well. Hopefully it's 2 of them, but we do not know yet from the card counting. He's got 1 or 2, but that is a really nice benefit. And if you know a little leadership ally called Beast, that's going to go really, really well with him. And then we have 2 resource generators. You can see Jet Belt and Mr. Hollywood here. Jet Belt is kind of a very standard resource generator. 2 cost, you exhaust it, generates a resource. It is locked to generating a resource for an event with its top option, but it has a second way you can exhaust it to generate a resource. If you also, while generating that resource, discard a card from Ionic Physiology, which will lower your attack, but maybe free you up to play another energy event. It's probably overall a downside with some niche times that it's handy to have that card discarded, but nonetheless, you exhaust it, discard a card from Ionic Physiology, and you get to generate an energy resource for any card, not just an event. Mr. Hollywood, on the other hand, is an extremely nice card. It's a 1-cost upgrade that doesn't exhaust to generate a resource. Now, it can only generate a resource to overpay for a card, but we have 8 events that want to be overpaid for in Wonder Man's own kit, and there's the Wasp ally in Aggression, Ant-Man ally in Leadership, and the new Firebird ally in Justice, as well as the new Everywhere All at Once event in Justice. So there are plenty of targets to overpay, and some of those cards, like the Justice event I mentioned, can be taken in any aspect because it's got an energy resource at the bottom left, so it works with his deck building ability. So potentially in any aspect, you could have at least like 11 targets for Mr. Hollywood, 12 if you're in anything outside of protection or pool. So plenty of targets. And if you just draw 3 cards that want to be overpaid for, Mr. Hollywood's generating 3 resources within 1 turn. That reminds me of, Cable's Grey Malkin, a little bit of like Uncanny X-Force, discounting multiple allies within 1 turn. So I think this is going to be really, really good. So he's rich, he's got damage, he's got, good forwarding, and oh yeah, he can heal for, I guess potentially an infinite amount if you can keep raiding up and attacking to clear it and, have the events in hand, maybe cheap 0-cost ones. I think realistically, you'll heal 1 to 3, maybe if you've got already up 4, like per turn at a push. But yeah, that's good amount. If you played Wolverine, 2 healing, kind of nice per turn. If you played Healing Factor in pool, 2 healing per turn is just really nice to have. So yeah, I think 3 per turn, especially from the mid game onwards, is a good amount of healing to expect, and I think that's going to be a really, really nice to have. So now I'm going to swap over to my notes. It's not going to look quite as pretty as Hall of Heroes, which is a great fan website I should mention. And actually, Hall of Heroes have added in this little link here, all energy resource events. And if you're looking to deck build with Wonder Man when he's out, you can just click on this and it will take you to Hall of Heroes. I'd probably sort by cost personally. And then you can see every energy kind of resource event in the game from the aspects and also basic, because you can just take basic cards and there are some really good ones. We're going to see some of these in my little notes that I've made. I kind of wish I had this when I made it. I just kind of went through the aspects looking at the energy ones because I was lazy. But some cards I really like the look of him is Mighty's Heroes. His 0-cost energy is just an event that you can just play it, get whatever benefit it has, and then get 1 healing and 1 extra basic attack damage by tucking it under Ionic Physiology. You have 3 0-cost energies, you're going to heal for free, get a +3 to your attack, and whatever benefits of playing this 0-cost event. So that's going to be pretty awesome. Because this readies you, you can just start to play even more like 0-cost energy events and do it all again. If you can take enough, if you've taken enough damage to get the healing from Ionic Physiology as necessary. But I still really like this. I didn't even really talk about this, but Wonder Man has the Aerial and Avenger traits, which are pretty juicy. There's a lot of aerial events. A couple of them have energy resources, like Aerial Intervention here. So if you have like an aerial ally out, this is just a nice way to prevent free damage, maybe for a friend of yours at the table if you're on multiplayer, etc., and get that healing and attack boost from Ionic Physiology, which I really, really like. So I'm going to go ahead to my little document now. But there's some really good stuff. I'm gonna keep going here because it's easy access to the pictures, which I haven't prepared. Leading Blow, I really like. 0 cost. You can have potentially 4 attack stat on Wonder Man. Now, Leading Blow's timing is weird. Shoutouts to my Discord server, the rules discussion especially. JS and V Jackson really helped me figure out what the heck was going on with Wonder Man's Ionic Physiology timing. If you want to benefit the most from Leading Blow, which is to say to play it while you're playing Wonder Man and get to tuck it under Ionic Physiology and get maximum damage, what you do is you have 2 cards tucked under Ionic Physiology already, you have 3 basic attack on Wonder Man, and you initiate a basic attack. Then you play Leading Blow. Discard a card from the encounter deck. Let's just say it's got 2 boost icons. So that's going to reduce your attack by 2. But then you kind of finish playing Leading Blow. It set up an effect for the future if the attack still deals damage, and then it gets discarded. You can immediately use the response on Ionic Physiology to tuck it under there. That would dynamically boost your basic attack because now you've got maximum cards tucked under Ionic Physiology. Now you're dealing 4 basic attack minus whatever boost icons were on that card you discarded, and then you're almost guaranteed to still deal damage here unless you get one of the rare 4 boost icon cards. And you ready up, but you've also got the healing from Ionic Physiology. It sounds complicated, but basically you attack with 3 basic attack, you play Leading Blow, you tuck that, you get to 4 basic attack, and you'll lose, on average 1 to 2 damage, but then you get to ready up and you've got the healing from Ionic Physiology. I think this is really, really good. I'm really looking forward to using this, particularly in builds which go really heavy on a lot of 0-cost energy events. What you'll see as we look here, that you've got things like Bring It, Get Over Here, Spoiling for a Fight, and a bit further down we'll see like Bombs Away. There's a whole bunch of stuff that works with minions, even 1 by 1. You can take in any aspect. So you can kind of turn any aspect into a very minion-focused, minion-summony kind of deck, which is fun. There's a whole bunch of defensive stuff, including the new event, which I think is called Stronger Together. There's a whole bunch of good stuff here. So we're going to go ahead over to my notes now. But I kind of summarized his strengths already, but huge damage, huge survivability. He's got 12 hit points self-healing and 3 stuns in that Starstruck card if he needs them. Good threat removal. He looks to be very rich. We'll have to see if he does have 2 of those bigger resource cards, but if he does, that's just an Avengers Mansion right there if you want it. The aerial trait, really nice to enable all those extra events, some of which are energy events and some of which are very cheap, which is handy. Like Yawn Roll is one we haven't talked about yet. Being multi-aspect just gives him so much versatility within each aspect to bring things that aspect wouldn't normally have. And his cards, by being flexible depending on how much you pay for them, overpay for them specifically, he's just going to be able to tailor whatever he has in his hand to whatever the situation's in front of him, which I think is really, really good. A subtle weakness I want to cover here is that because you want to play multiple energy resource events per turn, it's going to kind of almost shape what you play in a negative way, and it might not feel like it, but the regular heroes you guys play, that I play, they're not just going out of their way to play energy events. They might think, oh, this upgrade is really good, I'll play it now. Wonder Man will have a choice between playing the upgrade or getting more value out of energy events. It's going to be very subtle, but there's definitely an opportunity cost to kind of going out of your way to play these energy events. Even if they're perfectly good, they might just not be what any other character would do in that given situation because they're just maybe better options. But for Wonder Man, that's better, but it's not better than him, say, getting the same rewards for doing something else. There are a lot of hero abilities which kind of don't mind what you play, you just get whatever their benefit is. So this is a downside of sorts, but I wouldn't take it too seriously. It's just, it's kind of the main thing I think that holds back Angel, because he wants to play 2 aerial events per turn, 1 in each form for maximum value. But sometimes you want to play an upgrade or you don't have them, and you kind of lose out on a bit of the hero ability value. It'll be the same with Wonder Man, but just like Angel, I think he's going to feel very powerful anyway. It's just like a very subtle thing to take note of. There's some more stuff here, and if you guys want to pause the video, you're welcome to read it all, but I think it could take like an hour to go through if we read out everything here. Because as we move down to the archetypes, this is kind of what I envision his decks might look like. Some of these I'm not 100% sure about, but this is kind of what I've got in mind to look at each different player count. Mostly for him, I think it stays the same. This is partially because whatever aspect you're in, you can borrow events from the other aspects to make different things work. One of the things I really like is that Even the Odds, which I think is like the best forwarding card for multiplayer, has an energy resource and also requires an energy resource. So he can bring that in any aspect to really help out in multiplayer. He's just like Gamora in that respect. So I think that's going to be really good. And he can also bring Everywhere All at Once, which is the new event, which we should probably look at. I'll try and put it on the screen here, but this is really good for forwarding multiple schemes at the same time, which you often want to do in multiplayer because there's a lot of them, and he can take that in any aspect. So Wonder Man on your team is potentially going to be able to massively help out with the threat removal, maybe even be the main threat remover, even if he's in protection or aggression. It's just gonna, just got access to some of the best forwarding events in the game still. Beast is an ally in leadership that can grab a resource card, and his seems very good. He has a ton of energies, so the Captain Marvel ally is going to be very good. He's aerial, so he can have Ever Vigilant, which is not an energy event, but it's just a flexible event, so I think that still might be nice for him. We'll have to see how it goes. I also like the idea of Taunt for him to make sure he's taking enough damage to keep healing, and since Taunt draws you 3 cards, you're probably going to be able to heal even more with new events drawn from this, so that's kind of fun. Brute Force is another card I'll have to probably put on the screen here. It boosts your attack by 1, but if you basic attack, it goes away. So you can stack up 3 of these on a character, and on Wonder Man, since he can get up to 4 attack with Ionic Physiology, tucking cards under there, you can have 7 attack, 8 with combat training, and you can even boost this to 9 or 10. Technically even 11, like with other cards we have in the game. Technically even more than that if you really get out of your way. But I feel like 8 is a very realistic amount to boost your attack to. If you basic attack, you lose all of this, and you lose all the cards tucked under Ionic Physiology, so your attack goes down to 1. The decks that tend to use Brute Force are a bit gimmicky normally. Basically, you boost up your attack stat, and then you use things like Quick Strike or Smash the Problem or the Best Defense, things like this, which use your attack stat, but are not you making a basic attack. And that's really fascinating for Wonder Man. I typically think you're going to want to basic attack, clear out your tucked cards so you can start tucking more cards and healing again with Ionic Physiology. But I still think this is like a fun kind of concept to explore. I'm not going to go over all of these here, but as you can see in every aspect, whatever you do, I definitely think whether you go out of your way to focus on this or you just mixed it in with kind of other game plans, you're going to want a lot of cheap energy events. Maybe not all just, 0 cost, 1 cost, 2 cost, fine. Maybe sometimes you'll want more than that to make use of his big resource card. But just being able to, quickly charge up your Ionic Physiology feels very desirable. So I think that's always going to be a factor wherever you're deck building him in. But, when he's being released, assuming the reveals for him haven't, changed up his game plan massively, feel free to kind of refer back to this for some ideas. I think there's some good stuff here. Even Fluid Motion, which is a card where you get +1 attack for that turn or round, I can't remember. After you play an attack event, he doesn't ready up, so he's only getting the benefit from it once, but he does want to attack, and he has a lot of cheap attack events in his own kit. And of course, we have Earth's Mightiest Heroes as a 0 cost way for an Avenger to ready, so he can ready, particularly taking things like Leading Blow from off aspects and all sorts. So, this is kind of interesting to me as well. So a lot of fun stuff here, a lot of fun different builds, even if, you might be taking some of the same events, no matter what aspect you're in, no matter what deck build you have, if they seem good enough, we'll have to see how that shakes out. Moving on to what I'm calling notable cards, these are what I think he might like, excluding energy events. So we've got things like Death Focus, which reduces superpowers, of which he has at least 5, which is also an energy resource itself. So if you don't want to play it, you can just spend it to overpay for one of his events, and that's going to be useful. Hope Summons can grab a superpower, and since he can take, aerial cards from multiple aspects, things to them having, the energy resource, Power Flight, and Cannonball even, maybe more interesting than you'd think. We'll have to see how this actually works out in practice, but I'm kind of curious. I kind of definitely think there's some potential here. Since he has so many energy resource cards in his deck, Rock, Paper, Scissors will actually be very convenient card draw and pull. We've mentioned the Wasp and Ant-Man allies in Aggression and Leadership that you can overpay for. There's also the new one in Justice, Firebird. I'll put her on the screen briefly because I don't think people will be super familiar with her. But she's 2 cost. You overpay by 1, and that just means she comes back. So if you effectively make her a 3 cost ally, she has 4 hit points, which is quite good. And you can even exploit that by boosting up her hit points before she gets defeated, because she rises like a phoenix. She gets fully healed. If your leadership player puts +2 HP reinforced suit on her, when she comes back, she basically turns it into an 8 hit point total ally in that regard, if that makes sense. I do think leadership's really interesting. Kalu can find you an energy event. Kid Omega is an energy resource that wants an energy resource spent on him afterwards for his ability. So kind of interesting. Sting is a 1 cost ally with 1 attack or falling, very flexible to finish stuff off. Also an energy resource. Sunspot wants to be paid for energy resources. Go All Out can kind of use your big attack stat without getting rid of it. And then we've got Clarity of Purpose to take damage to kind of make Ionic Physiology, more usable if you take more damage. And Clarity, of course, can help overpay for any of those energy events because it generates a wild. Protection has some fun stuff. Brother Voodoo can help find an event you like. Taunt we talked about. Med Team is an energy card that lets you heal. Might be kind of interesting. Rogue can damage you. Energy Shield, I think, is really fascinating for Wonder Man. You put this on yourself, let's say, and whenever you take damage, you can spend energy resources to not take that damage. Yes, he wants to take some for Ionic Physiology, but if you'd lose the game, if you have 6 energy resources in your hand, you should just spend all of them to take 6 less damage. So it's not kind of immortality exactly, but it's going to mean that it's very, very hard for Wonder Man to lose 2 damage, especially surprise damage, as long as you've put an energy shield on yourself. Moving on to the actual energy events to consider from any aspect. There are actually more than this, but these are some of my favorites I want to talk about here. And if you're wondering about the numbers after some of them, that's kind of ideal player count to me, but they're still totally valid in other player counts. I was just making notes for kind of general use, general deck building, 1 by 1 hits multiple targets, really wants a minion. It's less consistent than solo play, but still viable there. I still use it there sometimes. But in 2 to 4 player, I don't even have to think about it. That is just totally a valid card to include. We've already talked about Earth's Mightiest Heroes. I really, really like this one. But we've also got Emergency, which is that 0 cost event that nobody ever uses, where when the enemy schemes, they scheme for 1 less. Well, this is an energy resource, so now they scheme for 1 less, you get healed for 1 because you took it under Ionic Physiology, and because you've done that, your hero has a +1 basic attack. So actually, I think Emergency is kind of a nice card for Wonder Man to consider, preferably in 3 or 4 player because someone's always getting schemed against there. One of the energy events here I like the most is You'll Pay for That. It's a 1 cost aggression event. After you take damage, you play this and you remove threat from a scheme equal to the amount of damage taken. You want to take damage so Ionic Physiology can keep healing you and you can keep getting the attack benefit. And this is really efficient extra threat removal from that. It might be better at 2 to 4 player, but it's still nonetheless very good here. and I think that's kind of a nice pick, particularly if you're in like protection with taunt, or you've got bait and switch in any aspect, which is kind of a sort of a taunt. Maybe too much threat removal for solo play, but bait and switch, yeah, just weirdly better for Wonder Man than most characters, which I think is fun to talk about. Turn the Tide is certainly going to be very popular in solo play for his builds in any aspect. Everywhere All at Once, I think, will be very popular, any player count, any aspect, because it's one of those few cards which benefits from Mr. Hollywood. And any aspect in 3 and 4 player, I mean, if you take even the odds, you're just going to absolutely destroy the threat, particularly in 4 player. I think that's really, really good. We talked about Leading Blow a lot. I really like that card despite the weird timing. Use it when you've got 2 cards tucked, not 3 cards tucked, and you'll get maximum value. Stronger Together is that new card. I'll put it on the screen. If you're a 2 defense character, this is a 0-cost card that will block 2 damage for a different player. Or maybe if you have an ally, you can even use it for consequential damage, but primarily a multiplayer card. But even with 2 defense, this is good. On other heroes, this is going to be like crazy good. Ghost Spider especially, it will like ready her and everything. As long as you've got like another player of the right trait. Although I even had the idea, if you're a web warrior, if you have Spider UK, you can have him defend, block his damage with Stronger Together, and he'll just get to deal a bunch of damage to the villain's face, basically for free, which I quite like. One of my favorite cards to talk about here that I somehow haven't even mentioned yet is Repurpose. And you can take this in any aspect. So I can be an aggression with 3 hand cannons, and I use up a couple of counters, I can repurpose that hand cannon, and because it's a energy resource card, I'm going to get to tuck this under Ionic Physiology, heal, and boost my basic attack just from that too, which I think is going to be very fun to experiment with. Some further combos to take this like even deeper are like all those aggression energy events that deal with minions, spotting for a fight summons them in, Get Over Here can bring them to you from another player in multiplayer, then Bombs Away can like wipe out multiple at once, or Bring It can like get a value from having multiple engage with you, and you've just got good ways to like damage them as well with good attacks. There's a lot of stuff here, and I could run all 6 of these events if I wanted to in Protection or Leadership. And if I'm in Leadership, I could also combine it with like Squared Off, which summons in a minion, or Hugin and Munin, which summons in a minion, readies me up. Air Supremacy, which a bit like Bombs Away can ready hit multiple minions very efficiently. So there's a lot of combos with using sort of aggression minion stuff in other aspects which benefit from minions. I'm not going to read them all out. There's a bunch on the screen here. There's probably even more than this, which I think is very fun. You can use aggression. If you're actually in aggression with him as your main aspect, you can use different ways to boost up your basic attack. And then you can combine that. Again, we talked about Leading Blow, but there's also Push Ahead, which is an energy event, and Unified Strike, which is the new card, which is kind of reverse teamwork. You exhaust your hero so your ally can do more stuff. There's a few allies like, I think I've got it written below, but like 2 Gun Kid, Dust, 4 Odinson, which can hit multiple targets. So if you boost up those allies' attack by exhausting your hero with Unified Strike, you kind of double dip on your hero's attack stat because the ally will send it out to multiple places. And the last thing I want to mention is Homeland Intervention is one of these 0-cost energy events in the game. This wants you to exhaust up to 3 shield supports or allies, and for each one exhausted, get 2 threat removed. And you can take this in any aspect. So I can have a bunch of leadership, shield cards, and I can exhaust them with Homeland Intervention despite not being in Justice primarily, which kind of fun. I don't know how optimal that will be, but definitely something that could be explored. My last little combos down here are, I like the idea of having Teamwork, which is an energy resource, and Unified Strike, which we just talked about, along with Enraged on one of your allies, because Unified Strike also prevents consequential damage on an ally, and Enraged boosts the damage an ally does, but also the consequential damage taken. I think that's fun. You can have Avenger allies from any aspect, along with Avengers Assemble. I could be playing Aggression with a whole bunch of Aggression Avengers, but I can just take this Leadership Avengers Assemble card, and they're going to all get powered up and ready up, which is really, really fun for some burst damage. And we also kind of mentioned about aerial allies from other aspects or something, with aerial intervention, which is kind of nice. You can have that Wasp ally in Aggression, which wants to be overpaid for, and then you can use aerial intervention to kind of exhaust that ally and get some damage reduced after that. Maybe there's some fun stuff there. So overall, I think Wonder Man looks, gonna say it again, wonderful. He has so many strengths, kind of a minor weakness. I mean, I think in some ways it'll have a bigger impact than it seems, but I don't think it'll seem like much, and I think he'll feel strong regardless. He's got so much damage. I think he's going to be really tanky, and he's going to have a lot of money, and a ton of events and flexible signature events of his own. Overall, I think, playing a bunch of events and like sequencing them and trying to get max value and mixing in basic attacks within that, I think it's going to feel quite a lot like Nova. Nelson shouted that out actually in our live reaction, which I'll try and link down below if I remember, if you're interested in seeing our first reaction. So that about does it for the video. I mean, I guess I usually like try and predict them for power. I don't know. A tier feels like a good word to throw out there, but the A tier, there's a lot of candidates for it. There's a lot of strong characters these days. They're not maybe getting stronger at the top overall, but definitely on average, the hero these days is stronger than when the game first came out. And whether, you consider him A tier, B tier, S tier, he's going to be perfectly fun and perfectly strong is my impression, which I think is the most important thing. And also very solo viable, as well as still good in multiplayer. So yeah, I've been Villain Theory, I guess. We did another deep dive, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So thanks so much, and see ya.